All right, what's going on, everyone? So, quick Iran war update here as President Trump prepares to address the nation in a few hours. The first time he's done that since the onset, in a formal setting, since the onset of hostilities in Iran a little over a month ago. So, a lot of speculation on what this could be. I got a couple ideas we're going to get into today. That is, if you can see past the sunburn. That 3 days in Florida is my daughter's spring break. So we're like, let's go spend a couple days on the beach. And I'm really, really good. Not to brag, but I'm really good at getting sunburned really fast. Like, that's kind of my thing. So in that regard, mission accomplished, kept the streak alive. And now I just got to deal with this for a couple days, which should be fun. But either way, President Trump addressing the nation here in a few hours. So we'll see how this ages. We get to judge this content very quickly here in the next 12 to 24 hours. So there's a couple different ideas on what the president might get into, and I do actually think we're going to hear something of note tonight. I'm in the camp that often we stay up for these speeches or debates or whatever it is, and then you go to bed and say, that was a complete and utter waste of my time. They did nothing at all. But this one feels different. First off, it sounds like there's not going to be media there. Like, it's just going to be a 20-minute address straight to the nation. Again, first time the president has done that since the war began, and really the first one was very, very informal. Like, not really making the case for war. He had a ball cap on, right? Like, no tie. I think he was in Mar-a-Lago, and it looked kind of ad hoc. Like, hurry up, get in front of the camera and put out an announcement because we're at war. So I think there's a good chance that we hear more of the argument for war tonight, the case being made to the American people. There's a little bit of speculation that this could be the announcement of mission accomplished. We did it, everybody. Let's come on home. I don't think that's the case. There's also talk that this could be saying that we're putting boots on the ground. The invasion of Iran has begun. I hope that's not the case for a couple different reasons. Where I think this is probably going tonight is President Trump is going to chastise our allies, try to guilt trip them into helping us open the Strait of Hormuz. And we're already getting a lot of indications that this is going to be about allies tonight. NATO, no doubt, is going to catch some heat. They already have. But I think this is going to be addressed at all of our other allies around the world, kind of a last-ditch effort to try to build some sort of coalition to open the Strait of Hormuz before possibly just saying enough's enough, we're out of here, because that's what the indications are in recent days. Now, the White House has been reiterating just yesterday the key objectives in this war, and they lay out: 1, the destruction of Iran's missile arsenal; 2, the annihilation of their navy; 3, destroying the terrorist proxies; and 4, ensuring Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Now, they are really kind of stressing that these have been the objectives since day one. I would argue that the messaging there has been pretty sloppy. I mean, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, just yesterday during a press conference went out of his way to say the key objectives of the war in Iran, and then didn't say anything about the nuclear program, which, depending on who you talk to on what day, that is the number one reason. For some folks, the only reason that we're in Iran at all. So to leave that off from a senior official, we'll call it messy communication. Now, the issue with all of this is some of these, you could argue, are accomplished or on their way to being accomplished, or maybe would require some sort of agreement with the future leadership of Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is becoming a real thorn in our side. It's not one of those 4 objectives. I think there's a good case to be made that it has become the 5th objective, or the one that the rest of this doesn't matter if it remains closed, and that's kind of President Trump's phrasing of it here in a second. That's not something we can fake. We can't talk our way through that, because the way the Strait of Hormuz is set up right now, and we'll pull up a map to show to kind of a good visual of this area. The way the Strait of Hormuz is set up, we've got Iran here in the northern portion of the screen, Persian Gulf moving through the middle, Strait of Hormuz right here, this narrow stretch. Iran controls that entirely right now. So we've got some good analysis, some friends of the channel that we'll get into here in a second. But Iran has effective control over what goes in and what comes out of the Persian Gulf. So it's not necessarily closed. They just are determining who goes through and at what price. That's a problem. It's a problem for the United States. It's a problem for all of our allies in the Gulf. It's a problem for the world economy. That has to reopen. And the situation where it sits right now is not ideal. In fact, a great rundown of all of this, as you might expect, Sal over on what's going on in shipping, refers to this as kind of like a toll booth style system right now, where it's not accurate to say that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, because there are technically ships coming and going. Not many. In fact, God bless Sal, man. Sal, the other day, there was this talking point going around that the strait was effectively open. traffic was back to its normal levels. And like, it's not. There's some moving through, but it is a far cry from being open. And what we're seeing right now with Iran's influence over the Strait is for the United States and Israeli ships, or those that are headed to the United States or Israel, they just can't go through. Like, the Strait is closed for them. For Iranian allies, they are permitted through with kind of these one-off style agreements. And then there's the middle ground of like, they're not fighting with the U.S. They're not necessarily in our corner, but they're also not necessarily a clear Iranian ally. They're just asked to pay a toll. And it sounds like more and more countries are agreeing to pay that toll to allow safe passage of their ships. You can tell that this is an issue that is clearly frustrating President Trump, because he went on a couple different rants yesterday and today, kind of contradicted himself in a couple different ways, but it just highlighted how much of a key issue the Strait is right now to the overall war aims. But before diving into that, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Proton Mail. So I think at some point we all just kind of accepted that privacy online isn't a thing anymore. And for kids right now, that's their experience from day one, which is why I partnered with today's sponsor, Proton Mail. Because these days, a digital footprint can start way earlier than you'd expect. And once it starts, it just keeps growing. Phones, apps, school accounts, it all adds up over time into something that they didn't really choose. And think about your own experience. It's not that different. I mean, most of us made our first email accounts as kids. We had no idea what we were getting into, but look at those inboxes now. They're full of spam, ads, and years of data being used behind the scenes. That was our version of the internet, but it doesn't have to be that way for our kids. With Proton Mail, you can reserve your child's email address right now for just $1. It's a private, ad-free account with no tracking and no profiling. It's a fresh start, a clean digital identity from day one that your child actually owns. So if you want to give them a better starting point, you can set up your child's Proton Mail account now, or create a free account for yourself using my link, proton.me/Preston Stewart. And thank you so much to Proton Mail for sponsoring today's video. All right, so President Trump yesterday, talking about the Strait, said, quote, all of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the United States. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait, and take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go and get your oil. So we're kind of in this weird spot of like, it doesn't matter. We don't care about the Strait at all. Also, you guys have to go get it yourself because we're not going to be there for you. We're not going to forget how you weren't here for us is something that we're seeing repeated over and over by the administration in recent days. Again, why I think we're probably going to see them coming down hard on our allies tonight. Now, that message was updated by President Trump just a few hours ago, where he said, quote, Iran's new regime president, much less radicalized and far more intelligent than his predecessors, has just asked the United States of America for a ceasefire. We will consider when the Strait of Hormuz is open, free, and clear. Now, a couple notes there. It's not a new president. It's the same president. So it's the same president. So there's that. Iran has said we are not asking for a ceasefire. So take that for what it's worth. But you can see that President Trump's conditions now are not around the nuclear program. It's not around the proxies. It's not about any of the key U.S. war aims, but the conditions for a ceasefire is opening the Strait of Hormuz. There was a post over on Twitter, or X, that I think did a pretty good job summarizing this. This was Angry Staffer, where they kind of ran through the phases of how we're viewing the Strait of Hormuz. Iran won't close the Strait. Iran better open the Strait. Iran has 2 days to open the Strait. Iran has a week to open the Strait. NATO, open the Strait. I'll bomb your critical infrastructure if the Strait isn't opened. I don't care about the Strait. No ceasefire until the Strait is open. It is hard to look at that and the up, down, sideways, back and forth, and to say that this is not important at all. I think a lot of folks are wanting to downplay its importance and look at maybe the limited effects so far. But if anything is getting this much attention from the President of the United States and the U.S. government as a war is being fought, it's a pretty clear indication that it matters. It is important. And this is clearly an issue that we're not able to just kind of talk our way through. The Iranian regime has recognized, they long knew, but have kind of recognized the amount of leverage they have simply by not fully closing, but kind of tolling the Strait. In fact, this has led to a report just yesterday that the United States is actually threatening to no longer sell weapons to our European allies if they don't get more involved in opening the strait. Think about that real quick. And I think this is probably what's going to play into tonight's address with President Trump going after NATO. We're not going to sell you, not give, sell you weapons if you don't do more here. This was reported in the Financial Times, where they say Donald Trump threatened to stop supplying weapons for Ukraine in order to pressure European allies to join a coalition of the willing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. 3 officials familiar with the discussions said that Trump responded by threatening to stop supplies to Pearl, that's P-U-R-L, the prioritized Ukraine requirements list. For reference, that list so this is the list where Ukraine says, that's a piece of equipment I need, and then our European allies purchase it from the United States and give it to Ukraine. So this was a big change during the Trump administration. Instead of the United States providing direct military assistance, we said, we'll sell it to you. And that in 2025 is $4 billion, $4 billion worth of sales. In 2026, it's estimated to be $15 billion. So just think about this real quick. $15 billion of arms sales this year. We are saying, no, we are not going to sell you a product, if this reporting is accurate, unless you come help in the Strait of Hormuz. So yeah, I think the strait is pretty significant if this is the type of thing we're putting on the line. The article says, as a result, and at the urging of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, a group of countries, including key alliance members, France, Germany, and the UK, issued a hastily agreed upon statement on March 19th, which said, quote, we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We talked about that comment on this channel. It was kind of a quick turnaround. It went from all these European countries saying like, yeah, no, this is your problem. Good luck figuring it out. Don't drag us into your war, and variations of that. Also, why did you not talk to us at all about doing this? And essentially no. Like the answer was no across the board. And then all of a sudden it was, actually, we're ready. Here we are. Turns out, according to the reporting, it was the threat of shutting off weapons sales that could aid Ukraine. They say another official said that Rutte, in a call with France, Germany, and the UK, explained that Trump was rather hysterical at the Europeans' refusal to help protect the Strait of Hormuz. When asked for statement, the Deputy White House Press Secretary Anna Kelly said, quote, President Trump has made his disappointment with NATO and the other allies clear. And as the president emphasized, the United States will remember. Now, that's not how NATO works. Like, we can't just do something and then all of a sudden assume that all of NATO is going to be right there waiting to jump in. I mean, even if we were on perfect terms with NATO right now, the way that Article 5 works, and we've talked about this multiple times in this channel related to Ukraine, is every country gets a vote. And they can say yes or no whether or not Article 5 is going to be invoked. It needs 32 out of 32 yeses. So even if we were on perfect terms with NATO, I'm not so sure Turkey, for instance, would vote for a NATO response against Iran. Just going out on a limb there. So take all of the domestic issues in all of these other countries that are having to measure domestic versus international responsibilities, requirements, treaties, all of that stuff. How does this play with your audience at home, right? The United States is not the only country where our politicians make decisions not based off of what other countries think, but also how it's going to play to the voting base. So all of the NATO countries would have to consider that and then vote yes. Take all of that aside. This isn't how NATO works. Like, we can't just do something and then assume that they're all going to be there. However, that is kind of how it's been presented by President Trump, as in NATO let us down. That's how it's been presented in recent days by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor and head of the archives and whatever else he's running these days. Venezuela vice president, maybe. And then Secretary Hegseth over at the Pentagon. So all of them have stressed that NATO and our allies are not doing the job, not standing by the United States when we need them most. And you kind of wonder at this point, what would have been different if an Iranian missile would have impacted a U.S. base and killed 10 or 20 American service members? I have a feeling the NATO response would be different, more unified, more ready to stand in our corner. But it does look like the way that we've gone about doing this, after chastising our allies over Greenland and support for Ukraine and so on, they're not very willing to jump in and help us out. Now, what that is turning into in very real time is we're seeing one-off deals brokered with Iran. So different countries, I think it was Pakistan most recently, they're coming up with agreements to allow some of their materials through the Strait of Hormuz. In most cases, that's paying a heavy toll. We might see Europe start to go that route. I mean, Europe is and every country is a little bit different, and we need to keep that in mind. This is probably not going to be like a NATO thing or European Union thing, but individual countries are now having to weigh getting some of their supplies through the Strait of Hormuz. The United States does not get a ton, but that's not the case for countries around the world. They're going to have to decide, do we want to stay in the U.S.'s good graces and deal with this potential shortfall of LNG or fuel or whatever it might be coming through the strait? Or do we not care as much about the U.S. protection and alliance and friendship going forward? We need that stuff now, or we're going to face a major issue on the domestic front. We're kind of forcing, I should say this, Iran. Iran is the one that closed the strait. They closed it in response to U.S. actions, but Iran is the one that made the decision to impose these restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz. I don't want to take that agency away from them. That is forcing a decision from our allies, our NATO allies, and our non-NATO allies around the world. This also opens the possibility of somebody stepping in here to settle things and make it easier, just get things back to normal. You can understand how a lot of countries right now around the world would be looking at this saying, can you just get it back to how it was? That's all we want. Just no missiles flying into Dubai, just no drones knocking out tankers in the Persian Gulf. Just how about instead of like zero natural gas coming through the strait, how about like 60% of what it was? It can be a reduction, but just like something. That opens the door for someone like China specifically to step in and try to serve as that middle ground broker and finding a system, finding a way for these countries to transit safely and to stop the attacks in the Middle East. I don't know if we're close to that, but I just want to offer that up as things are broken right now in the Middle East. That offers an opportunity very similar to USAID. Remember when we just shut that down? We're like, we're out of here, turning off all these programs. It's a stupid waste of money. We don't need it. There were a bunch of those big programs that as they closed down just opened the door for China to step in. Is like an easy layup. Like if we're not going to be funding, baby vaccines in some portion of Africa, like the clinic is already there, the people are already there expecting that. China can just step in and backfill that very, very easily. This is another scenario like that where it opens the door for an easy backfill by someone like China. Russia doesn't have the ability to do this right now. So anyways, in terms of what to watch for tonight, it's hard to dial in exactly what President Trump's threats or actions will be. I mean, he is unpredictable, to say the least. But I have a feeling that in a couple hours, we're going to hear kind of either overt or very thinly veiled threats towards our allies, threatening things we've never even considered being on the table if they don't provide more assistance or just direct military support into the strait to force open that waterway to allow more of these goods to pass through. That is what I expect from President Trump here in a few hours. Not boots on the ground, not an end to hostilities, but one last big attempt. I think it's probably not going to be successful if we're threatening allies instead of. I think we've missed the ball on that in a lot of ways. But I expect we're going to get one more big threat before whatever comes next. And what comes next genuinely might be just declaring victory and going home. That's all the kind of stuff that's going to play out in the next probably 5 to 10 days. So we'll do our best to keep you updated. Not just here, of course, but on Substack. For anybody who hasn't checked out that platform yet, we're consolidating content over there. So it's everything. It's the interview, short form, long form, daily rundown of notes and research, videos, posts, podcasts, things like that. And a community chat that I'm pretty excited about. Pretty cool so far to see what members of the community are interested in posting and publishing there as well. So if interested, that'll be in the description. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.